I think what I've decided to do is just go 4 7/8 up here, and then we'll go in an inch here. We'll make a little pocket like this. Yeah, I've made that wrong already. It's 1/4 of an inch. So we'll make 1/4 of an inch like that. And then with the center here, kind of come up from this point, kind of up like this. I don't know if you can see that. So it'll come in here about 1/2 an inch. I didn't even draw that right because that's an inch, so it'll come over to here. So it'll kind of encapsulate that that top piece here. So I didn't explain that very well. I know these are actually the pieces that'll be in there. Those are the bottom parts. What I'm going to try to do here is a little bit tricky. It's either going to look really great or it's going to look like crap. So 4 7/8 in. I need to cut a slot. I think this is a square top blade, so it would cut that okay. Let's see if this seems like a good idea. I think I can do that. I could use the dado blade, but this will work, and I can sneak up on the fit. The next step, I think, is to cut these at an angle. I think I'm just going to go 45. But I don't want to cut from here. I don't want to cut the angle from this corner, right? So this is kind of what I'm going after, is I want that piece to be in there. I'll push it out so you can see it. And then I want the angle to be like, that's an inch, so I'm going to go half an inch in. Just a detail, that's all. I could easily just do that, but I think I'm going to go half an inch in and make that bevel. And that should be pretty easy. I definitely need to mark these. Top. Because they're not symmetrical. I had to search, but I found it. That jewelry case I was mentioning, I built many years ago. I built this jig for building the little doors on it because I had to bevel the ends of the little door frames. So I made this jig that has a perfect 45, and it fits in the miter slots of my saw. So what I might be able to do is, the idea is that then I can eyeball where I want my miter to end, and the jig just kind of takes care of where it begins. This might work. This might just work. So what I can actually do is I can measure that and put a stop here so that every one of these cuts is identical. They don't have to be half an inch there, but what they have to be is they have to be all the same. If they're not, your eye won't be drawn to it if they're not a half an inch, but if they're not all the same, your eye will be drawn to it for sure. So I'm going to, let's see, that fits that blade perfectly. So I'll just eyeball, about, so it comes out about a half an inch or so. About a half an inch or so, just right there. So we have to go back. Okay, so that's about right. And then I'm going to draw a line here. Double check it. It's still pretty good. And then I'll get a piece of scrap and tack it on there. I can just use some of this I've been using. I have to remember it's not square, so I can't use that side. And I don't need a big chunk like that either, I could easily just use a small piece because I just need a stop. I don't need a whole fence there. All right, I think I'm gonna just tack that. Drive a little staple through it. I can't believe I found that jig. I haven't seen it in years. Well, I guess I have, because I put it away up on that shelf. I think that was probably 10 years ago I used that. Okay, this should do it. Okay. There's a little bit of slop there. It's not too bad. If I push it to one side as I'm cutting, then they'll at least be all the same. All right. Let's go crazy. Top. take the top, put it in there, cut that, and that should come out just right. I can't go all the way because I don't want to cut this piece here. If I go all the way, it'll run into that. So also what I want to do, this is a part that gets a little bit scary, is run this blade right up. And it's going to make a lot of noise so that the blade is as vertical as it can be. I admit that looks different than I thought it would, but I think it still looks okay. Again, this is what I'm going for. Yeah, it might be folly, but this is what I'm going for. Okay. Well, I think it'll be fine. I'm getting very close to assembly here. If I could do it again, I would rabbet this, but that would require that this base be longer, so I can't do that now. I think we're ready kind of for a bit of a dry fit. Oh, it's a little too snug end to end. Well, maybe it's just the clamp is pushing it together at the top, perhaps. Yeah, I think that's good. But yeah, so this looks like approximately what we're dealing with. Okay, I think we'll go with that. I managed to get all of my pieces cut. I believe they're all cut to final size. So what I've got here is I've got my little end pieces. This is supposed to look like one of those old-timey wooden toolboxes that you might find. And this one goes here. These small strips will go in these slots. It's going to be put together so that the jars don't come out. So these pieces will go in the slots, and then these pieces will go here. It'll kind of look like a toolbox / crate system. And then I have a dowel. I have a dowel to go across here for a little handle. I don't know how functional that is, but it's really a display piece. It's not something you're going to carry around a job site, obviously. So yeah, that's the gist of it. My wife was asking me about it last night, and I realized that there's going to be one little difficulty. Usually, I try to assemble a piece before I sand it and finish it. But because these jars are going to be in it, they're going to be captive in it. That means that once I assemble it, I can't finish the insides of it. So I'm going to have to finish the top part of the bottom, the insides of the ends, and probably the entirety of these. I don't want to be putting stain and stuff on here right on top of the jars. I'll make a mess of them. Maybe even finish these strips as well. The reason I don't care to finish things before I assemble is I just want a nice clean wood surface for glue contact. And if I put any kind of finish, especially if it's a film finish like a lacquer or urethane or really even a shellac, that's going to interfere with the adhesion of the glue. I haven't decided what finish coat I'm going to put on this, but I have worked up a couple of samples of stain. Now this is red oak. This is a stain that I've used on white oak quite a bit. It's a beautiful stain in my opinion. And this is a clock that I made a few years ago, and it has that stain. That's that stain here. So you can see how it actually seems to work nicer on a white oak. This is red oak, and this is white oak. White oak is, again, more brown. If it's brown, it's white. If it's red, it's red. So I'm not sure that that's the appropriate stain for this. But this is appropriately called a red oak stain. I think maybe this is a better stain for this project. And then once I'm done with that, staining the wood, then I'll put a protective coat on it. I think this is just shellac. Shellac is a good coating if you're not looking for a physical barrier to moisture or anything. It's a nice finish. The reason I like it the best is that it's easy to apply, and it sets up really fast, so it doesn't end up getting a lot of dust and whatnot in it. So I was talking about medullary rays the other day, and you can see, I think, some of the medullary rays in this white oak along here. I hope you can see that. So that's a hallmark of white oak. Unfortunately, my little clock fell off the table one day and it got damaged here. I don't know that that's anything I could even fix. So we'll see. But anyway, that's my little clock. It just sits in the shop here. I don't know that I've ever even put a battery in it. You know, I guess you're supposed to go 10 and 2, right? So the sun is looks like it's kind of fading it in different places. But yeah, so that was one of my first projects. It's all hand cut, and projects are not so much about the result is they're about the process. So this project, this is a plan that came from Woodsmith Shop Plans. And the point of this project is to teach you hand-cut tannins and joinery, tannins and mortises. So what's going on here is all of these are stiles and these are rails. And so the rails all have a tannin that's mortised into the stile. And that I cut all that by hand. So then, and there's a number of other techniques that were employed, making a curved portion there. It's mostly empty inside. So yeah, it's a pretty piece. I really should take it in the house, I suppose. It's a nice clock. So that's one of the first pieces that I really made. So again, I think that red oak stain on the red oak might be a good choice for this. Now I think I'm ready to sand this. This doesn't need a ton of sanding because it's all planed lumber. It's pretty smooth, but it definitely could be improved yet. I have to remember that these are a nice, not even very snug anymore. So I don't want to sand that a lot, make that loose. It's still good. I'll start with a 100. I've mentioned before, in my opinion, sandpaper kind of falls into two categories, maybe three. And so the very fine grit sandpaper, 40, 60, 80 in there, that's for shaping. If you've got a lot of material to take off of something for a particular reason, if this isn't the right shape, then you can use that grit to take material off. Once you get into 100, my opinion is a 100 is about the crossover. So 100 can be used for shaping, but then from 100 up to, I'm going to say, most of the way to 1,000 really is for smoothing. So all you're doing is you're taking away the scratches from the previous grit. Okay, you're smoothing that away. So you work up through the grits and don't skip grits. Work up sequentially. I have 100s, I have 150s, I have 220s, I think, and I think it goes to 320 from there. I don't have anything in between. So once you get up to the higher hundreds, even 800, then you go from smoothing to actually what I would call polishing. So polishing, quite often, you're going to be doing after your finish. So you put your finish on, say if you've got a nice polyurethane, even a shellac finish. I've sanded shellac to 1,000 grit. I've sanded shellac to 400 grit, and it's just beautiful. So that's my opinion on sandpaper. And I took a finishing class a few years ago, and one of the first things the guy said, because any finish starts with sanding, because your finish is only as good as your substrate, right? And he said most people hate sanding, but that's usually because they don't know when they're done sanding. And I would agree with that. I would agree with that assessment, because it really doesn't take that much to finish sanding. I'm going to start with my little orbital sander. It's going to be a little tricky to do these small pieces, but I think I can manage. And again, these are nice and smooth already. I'm just going to do a quick once over and then work up through the grits and call it finished. Okay, this is my little cheap Black & Decker orbital sander. I shouldn't be disparaging about it too much. It's lasted me a lot of years and didn't cost me a ton of money. Sanders, however, are unbelievably expensive for what they are. You know, if you want to get a good quality sander, you're starting at hundreds of dollars. It's just the way it is. This kind of a sander comes in at about maybe $50 or $60. And in my opinion, again, Black & Decker brand tools are among the worst quality tools you could possibly buy. Now I know Black & Decker Corporation, they own a myriad of brands, and those brands, including DeWalt, I believe, but those brands can be good. They're not crappy brands just because they're owned by Black & Decker. But Black & Decker brand tools are just about the worst, which is weird because they were kind of pretty good tools back in the 70s. Anyway, let's hit this and see what happens. I can feel a big difference already. There's no reason for me to sand the edges. That's glue surface. Yeah, so that's feeling really good. Okay, so that's the end of my 100 grit. Now, as I was sanding, I was thinking, oh, there's one more thing I need to do, and that's drill the hole, put the little handle in. But that can be done. I don't need to sand that afterward, really. I'm not exactly sure what species this is, but this is the dowel I had planned to use. It might be a bit chunky. What do you think? I don't know if I've got a smaller one. That's, I think, 3. That's a 1-inch dowel. That's about a 5/8 dowel. I think that might be more appropriate. A more appropriate size for that. I think I'll use that one. It's a very light wood though, so it's not going to look the same as the rest of the project. All right, we need a new grit. Now, before I do that, put that back on. I'm just gonna, let's see. So these are gonna be, this is a glue surface down here. These are glue surfaces, but this is not. I'd like to ease these corners a little bit. This wood gets pretty chippy and splintery if you don't ease them. That's nice. I can also ease that with a router bit. This is a small project though, so I don't really want to make much of a radius on that. I just want to make it so it's not harsh. And then I can do a lot of that by hand actually. You know, you can easily take a piece of sandpaper and that's done pretty well the same thing. But we got machines, so we use machines, right? The base, I don't need to ease anything because there won't be any edges that you can come into contact with on this. It's got that piece on the bottom, and then it's got that piece on the end. It's totally captive. So we're good there. All right, now we'll get some more grit. Got a nice sheet of 150 here. And rinse and repeat. Now you see me do that. When you have this off the workpiece, that will start spinning really fast. And if you put it down on your workpiece, it can make marks in a circular fashion on there. So it's best to stop it. It doesn't hurt your hand at all. You can put it on your workbench to stop it, but I don't want to make marks on my table, although I am making marks on my table. So, all right, I can feel that that's really nice already. So let's go another 1 or 2 grits. So that was 150. The next one up I have is 220, and it's not even the right size for this sander. It's too big, but that's okay. It'll work. Yeah, it's getting nice and glassy. That's really nice. So now that I've sanded this, the stain will actually look different on this. It doesn't soak in as much. Okay, we're going to go up to 320. And that's where I'll stop. So I've sanded half of that to 320, and that's 220, and I can feel the difference. That glides so much easier there than it does there. Okay, I'm going to call that done. I'll have to sand the handle part when I make that, but for now that's all we've got to do. I'll apply some stain next, but before I do that, I want to get the dust out of the pores. Oak, white oak and red oak specifically, they have an open pore structure. You can see those little lines. The green is porous. And that'll affect how the stain absorbs. This is a Minwax Red Oak number 215 stain. Staining wood is dead simple, and oak in particular takes stain really nicely. I just use a paper towel, these blue shop towels. I get some stain off of that lid so it's not a pain. Okay, well, it's just a wax on, wax off kind of a thing, right? You can wear gloves. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. You can't put it on too thick. You can put it on too thin. So you would just want to kind of saturate it so that the wood can soak up as much stain as it wants to. See, I think you can see now that is a little different than this because I've sanded it. So maybe I should have sanded my samples. That's beautiful, I think. To make sure I get the edges. Well, the edges actually don't need to be stained, do they? The bottom doesn't really need to be stained. You look a lot of projects, and especially things you buy in the store, and they won't have any finish on the bottom. They don't waste finish on stuff you don't look at. So this, again, doesn't need stain on the edges. And I will intentionally not stain the edges. I have a little bit of stain on there, it's no big deal, but because I want to glue those. And I believe having no stain and no finish is best case for those. Now I'll show you something here that's a principle for any wood, but particularly oak, because of that open grain structure I was talking about. Now, I also don't need to stain in these grooves because, again, that's a glue surface. You won't see that. So I'll show you this. You see how the stain has soaked into this more readily than this? You can prevent this, even this coloring out. You saw me sand this to 320. If you take this to about 400 or so, then that'll reduce the amount of stain that's going to soak into the end grain, and it'll balance it out with this more. Not real concerned about that in this project. I did a really nice coffee table for a guy one time, and I had to do that. And it was tricky because it wasn't a top grain, end grain situation. It was a top grain, and then it curved down into end grain. So it wasn't just one or the other. But, you know, in the end, it was perfect. It worked out absolutely perfectly. You know, it was the first time I'd ever done that. So again, it's not difficult at all. Dirty hands is an indication that you've been working. I don't mind having dirty hands. People buy dirty clothes and ripped clothes and stuff from the store because they want to look like they've been doing something productive without actually doing anything productive. I think in some circles they would call that appropriation, when you're trying to look like somebody you're not, trying to look like a group of people that you're not a part of. But appropriating the look of a working person doesn't seem to be a big deal for society. They don't seem to mind it at all. I'll just even out the stain a little bit. This would be a use for my little pyramid finishing blocks, but really that stain is pretty well done now, so there's not much more to do with it. Oh, I don't really need more. Just wipe it, even it out. Okay, and then the sides. I've seen people do this in factory situations, and there is stain running everywhere. They've got cloths that are just absolutely saturated in stain, and they're just throwing it on there. So it's not really like painting. It's pretty easy. And again, oak is very forgiving. One thing you should never try to stain is pine. You can do it. It works okay. But it looks terrible because it absorbs stain in very irregular patterns. Very blotchy, very, not nice at all. That's pine. I've had people often ask me, should I stain this pine door or something? I'd say no. Paint it or something. Stain is not for pine. I don't think maple takes stain very well either. And I don't think you normally will gain anything with a second coat. So this is done. It's kind of dry to the touch, but I think I do want to let it sit a while, partly because I haven't decided what my top coat is. Some of my choices for top coat are, this is shellac. This is liquid shellac, which I've always used. You can buy shellac in flakes, and it kind of looks like cornflakes or something, and you dissolve it in alcohol, but that's kind of what's in here. So it's a good finish. It's a very traditional finish. It's a food safe finish. You can, those flakes that I mentioned, you can eat those, and you do eat those because shellac is used in food products to make them hard coating and shiny, like some chocolate covered almonds or something like that. They can often have shellac on the outside to keep it together and protect the chocolate from melting and make it shiny. So anyway, shellac is a really good choice. I like the way shellac goes on. You do have to apply multiple coats, but it dries fast. So you can apply probably 4 coats in an hour or something like that. And it just wipes on a lot like the stain. It dries fast. It's not expensive. It's not toxic as far as trying to breathe it. There is alcohol, so it does evaporate. The alcohol does evaporate, so there's that. That'll make you a bit high. But I like shellac for those reasons. The downsides of shellac is it's not a really good protectant as far as water. If you're doing a coffee table, don't shellac that, because somebody's going to set that. That's kind of where coasters came from. You set a glass, the glass sweats, and it makes a ring in the shellac. Shellac was used almost universally up way into the beginning of the 20th century. So anyway, that's shellac. I might shellac this because it's an indoor project. It's not a table or anything that anybody's going to be setting things on. And, it's just a really nice finish. Now, if you want to put a coffee table where you're going to set glasses on it, this is your go-to. Polyurethane. This literally makes a film of plastic on top of the wood. It can give a very shiny coat. This is a clear satin polyurethane, so it has impurities in it to make it not as shiny of a finish. So that's an option, polyurethane. Downsides is it's kind of nasty to work with. It's easy to get so many little bits of dust and things in it, and doesn't make a very smooth finish, and it really should be sprayed on. So I have to get my spray system out. I have to mask my shop, so I'm not leaning toward that. This is a lacquer. So this is basically just clear spray paint is what this is. And it works really good. It's tougher than shellac. It's not as tough as polyurethane, but it's a good choice. I found that this stuff takes a long time to dry. So, you know, it's easy to apply. It's already in a spray can. I'm not really leaning toward this. It smells really bad. Well, it's spray paint is what it is. It's just spray paint. It's just clear. So I think I'm going to shellac this project. I'd like to show you that because a lot of people don't use shellac, and you might like seeing that. Now there's a whole subculture of people who use shellac, and I'm not part of that subculture. So I'm not doing it just the way the real shellac experts do it. Then, you know, you can point that out if you want, but you know, you're not telling me anything I don't know. I already know that. But I do know that what I'm doing does work. I've done it many times. Quite often, you'll see someone teach you. You take a cloth and kind of wad it up and set it in here, and then make a ball like that out of it with that cloth in the center. And that works really well. I'm not going to do that. I don't have another cloth handy. So I'm just going to shellac this. And of course, I can only shellac one side. And then I need to let it sit a bit. And then I can shellac the other. Get some of this on there. And again, it's not toxic to your hands or anything. It dries quite quickly. And I'll put a number of coats on, and then I'll actually sand it with, I might start with a 320. I go to a 400 grit, sand that nice. Do you see why I like the combination of stain and shellac? I can do it fairly quickly. I don't need to put one on and wait for a whole day. And shellac is one of those things that when you put a new coat on it, it actually melts into the coat below it because, again, it's a kind of a solid that's dissolved in the alcohol. So when you take more of the alcohol solution and put it on top of a shellac surface, it then melts that shellac, and it's not layer upon layer, it just makes the layer bigger. I'll just do a rough coat to start with. Once it's dry, I can do the other sides. I guess that's where the term, if you give somebody a good shellacking, maybe that's where that term comes from, eh? Give somebody a good thorough shellacking. Okay, I'm going to let this sit now for a while. Let that get set up. I'll flip all these over and get a coat on the other side. Look at my hands. Back to the little box project. This has been sitting for a few days, so I need to get at it, get it done. I found a can of spray shellac in my stash. I've used it up now, but it was pretty convenient just to spray this. And so now I'm back to the can of shellac. Now, I've got a few coats on here, and it's nicely set. So I'm going to sand it, actually. I've got some 400 grit, and when I sand it, it'll get cloudy. And you'll see the cloudiness, but what you can't feel is the smoothness of the finish of the surface. So even that's far smoother. Oh, that's really nice. It just occurred to me that I'd better prepare this little handle for installation. If I get this all done and ready to go, I still have to finish this. It'll take me a lot more time. So I'm just going to quickly sand it, and I'll throw some stain on it. My gut says this is not going to stain very well. We will see. Yeah, it's blotchy and terrible looking. What else am I going to do? It is what it is. That should work. I can get some shellac on it. That spray shellac is convenient. small project like this, that might really be the way to go. I'll set that there. See if I can get some more shellac on these pieces. If you're a refinisher or a finishing carpenter and you can set me straight on what I should be doing here, what I'm doing wrong, you go ahead in the comments and tell everybody, because I know I'm not doing this quite right. Maybe not right at all. I'm just trying to get this on here and get this project off my bench. Do one side of these. I'm just going to do one side of these so they don't stick down. I always find when I get a project going into the finishing stage, it's very frustrating because this is kind of what it takes. It's 5 minutes of finishing and 24 hours of waiting. And I can't really do too much else in here because I'll make dust. Anything I do will make dust. And then that gets in my project. So not crazy about that. Thanks for watching.